All right, so we've been practicing different things having to do with parabolas. So I want to just check for some understanding before you get the next practice worksheet to go with all this information we've been doing. So I'm going to give you this equation. Y equals A times the quantity H minus X squared plus K. You can write that on your board again on the side, the non-graph side. One side has a graph, one side is plain. We'll go to the graph side in just a little bit. The first thing I would like each of you to tell me is, what do we call this equation? What do we call this equation? So I want you to write the name on your board and just hold it up to me in a minute. Don't hold up your board yet, but actually just write the name on the board. And again, I want to know what each person knows. This isn't about what information you can get from your neighbor, because I need to make sure we understand what this is. So actually write that name on the board, and I'm going to have you hold them up in just a moment. There's only about half of us that have the actual name. This is a quadratic function, so a lot of you put that. But this is specifically the vertex form of the quadratic function. So we need to know that this is called vertex form. And very rightfully so, because of some of the information. So now my next question is, using the letters in the equation, what is the vertex of the function? All right, everybody hold up your boards. Let me see what we got for the vertex based on this. Okay, our numbers are going up here. More of us had this right. The vertex here is the ordered pair H comma K. We get the that's why it's called the vertex form. It's giving us the vertex of the parabola, which is also telling me the axis of symmetry. This is something we haven't talked about for a little bit, but this is going to come up on the homework. The axis of symmetry, which I'm just going to abbreviate as AOS, would be x equals h. And it needs to be x equals. It's a line. It's not just a number. Don't tell me the axis of symmetry is 3. It's the line x, and it's always an x equals, because it's always a vertical line for a parabola. So we're always talking the line x equals 3, because this is going to come up. So whatever you say is your vertex, whatever you put in as that x coordinate for your vertex, that's going to be your axis of symmetry. Now, which letter in there affects the graph moving left or right? Which letter is my horizontal translation? We just, in our notes from yesterday, this would be called a horizontal translation. Which letter there is my horizontal translation? All right, make sure your answers are written down. Hold up your boards. Let me see which letter is my horizontal translation. All right, We're hit and miss. I've got about half of us said H, half of us said A. Remember, horizontal translation is my left-right movement. My horizontal translation is H. So which letter is my vertical translation? All right, go ahead and hold your boards up. All right, we did better this time. I'm seeing mostly K's. K's is my vertical translation. So which letter does my vertical stretch or compression? Which letter? You don't have to write down all the titles because you guys are going to be erasing this anyways, though the video will be available if you need to go back and review this. Which letter gives me my vertical stretch or compression? Just need a letter real quick so we can move on to actually working on graphing. I just want to make sure we understand. All right, hold them up. All right, by process of elimination, we did good there. We finally got to A as our vertical stretch compression. So now what I'm going to do, now I'm actually going to give you an equation in Vertex form, and we're going to work on graphing it, but we're going to work on graphing it in pieces. So if I give you, let's start off with y equals the quantity x plus 1 squared plus 3. Okay, so we're on the graph side now. Y equals the quantity x plus 1 squared plus 3. So before we graph anything, I want you to tell me what is the ordered pair for my vertex based on, just write it on your, you can write it on the plain side if you want, just write the ordered pair, or if you want to write it in a corner of the graph, that's fine. But what is my vertex if my equation is y equals the quantity x plus 1 squared plus 3? Just looking, I'm not looking for anyone to graph anything yet. I'm simply looking for an ordered pair of my vertex. All right, let's hold them up. I need to see everybody's board. All right, we've got a mixture. I've got some that say it's positive 1, 3, and some that say it's negative 1, 3. If it's inside the parentheses and it's positive, which way does it shift? To the left, so that means it had to be a negative 3. So my vertex here should have been negative 1, 3. So what is my axis of symmetry? Because again, this homework is going to ask this. What is my axis of symmetry? That again, I'm just going to abbreviate as AOS. Remember, it has to start off with an x equals. X equals. So what is x going to equal? Right, jot your answer down real quick and we'll check those. All right, hold them up. Let me see. What is my axis of symmetry? Again, those of you that just gave me a number, that is not a correct answer. My axis of symmetry is x equals -1. It is a line. And what that line means is at -1 on my graph, that's where I know to draw in my dotted line. That's what's dividing my parabola in half. So if you give me on a test just a number, I will mark it wrong because it's not just -1. It is the line x equals -1, and it represents that dotted line that I just drew. So now go ahead and mark your vertex on your graph. And now, is this going to be an absolute minimum or an absolute maximum? Well, I guess here's the first question. Is this going to open upward or open downward? Upward. It's a positive. There's nothing in front of that parentheses. There's no negative sign. So this one opens upward. And if it opens upward, does that make the vertex at the very bottom or the very top? Bottom. So we would call that an absolute minimum. So this one has an absolute minimum. So now you need to create a table of values to graph some other points. So now if I'm creating a table of values to find out, I know again one of my values. I know I have a point at -1, 3. I'm going to put that in the middle of my table of values because I also know that my parabola is symmetrical. I have 2 points on the left of that sign I can do and 2 points on the right to help me get that shape. So if I put -1 in the center, I can go -2, -3 below it, and I can go 0 and 1. That vertex determines where I'm going to pick those points on the other side because, again, I know the vertex is in the middle. So I'm going to give you a moment to finish your table to get your set of points, and we'll check our points before you actually graph it. All right, let me see our table of values that we came up with. Let me see those tables. I'm seeing a lot of bad math out there because if you're doing this table correctly, the 2 numbers above the vertex should be the same as the 2 numbers below the vertex. It's symmetrical. If I put in -2, -2 plus 1 is -1. -1 squared is 1. 1 plus 3 is 4. If I look the other side, 0 plus 1 is 1. 1 squared is 1 plus 3 is 4. If I put in -3, -3 plus 1 is -2. -2 squared is +4. 4 plus 3 is 7. 1 plus 1 is 2. 2 squared is 4. 4 plus 3 is 7. These tables have to be symmetrical. That's why we put that vertex in the center, so we would get 2 points on the left and we would get 2 points on the right. So now if I graph those points, -2, 4, 0, 4, -3, 7. You should have a symmetrical, your points, you should always have a mirroring point. That's why we put that vertex in the middle. And there's a couple other questions that are going to come up about this graph on your homework. One, it's going to ask for the transformation. What kind of transformation when we're talking shift left, shift right, shift up, shift down. What transformation happened from our parent function to this graph? Again, what transformation? Because it's going to ask you to name the transformation. Translation, but what type of translation? Because it's actually two different ones here. To the left, which would be a horizontal translation, and up would be a vertical. So we had both a horizontal translation and a vertical translation. And again, it's also possible to have reflections. It could have more, it could have multiple transformations. In this case, we had two, but it's possible you could have like 4 transformations happening in the same graph here. And then it asks domain and range. Domain, we've talked about this. Domain does not change. Domain for any parabola, because again, domain is my possible x values. There's no restriction on my x values. I can go as far left as I want. I can go as far right as I want. So my domain is always all real numbers. I don't have any restrictions. If you write that in, you could write that in interval notation, and in interval notation, that would be negative infinity, comma, positive infinity. They mean the same thing. But now my range. My range is my y values. What is the lowest y value that I can have on this graph? 3. So I could say that y has to be greater than or equal to 3. And in interval notation, that would be bracket, because 3 is included, comma, infinity, parenthesis, because it can keep going up forever. There's no ceiling on those y values. It just cannot go below 3. And then it's going to ask about x and y intercepts. Now my graph is off the way, I just realized the way they did this. So on your graph, what is the y-intercept? Okay, it's not a number. The y-intercept is an ordered pair 0, 4. Again, it's a point where it crosses the y-axis. Does this graph cross the x-axis? So for x-intercepts, we would say none. It is possible that you do not have an x-intercept. If the vertex is at 0, 0, that means your x-intercept is 0, 0 because it's touching the x-axis. This one is above the x-axis, so it never touches. So those are all questions that are going to be asked about these homework problems and all the things that you're going to have to do. Before you erase your board, and I hope you haven't erased yet, I want to pass out the homework so you have that as a guide to maybe get started on a problem or two to put this into effect.